Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Rome. I was brought up in London, and I've lived in High Peak for about 25 years.
I was born in London, and when I was 2 years old my parents decided to move to Manchester. So up to the age of 7 I was just on the outskirts of the inner city, on the the old Ashton Hall Road, just off there on a street called Barmouth Street. And at 7, just like a lot of people, I was moved up to Hattersley and lived there till I was 15. Then I went to St James's School on the estate, and then later went to what is now called All Saints, but it was St Peter's and Paul's in Duckenfield. And then my parents, at the age when I was 15, decided to move back to Dublin. So I went back to Dublin, and at 18 moved back, and then I met my husband, and then we kind of we've lived in Devon, Spain, and eventually ended up back in came to this area. I've got a lot of family here. So I've got family in Chapel on the Frith, Whaley Bridge. My sister lives in New Mills, which is where I live. I have a daughter who lives in the High Peak as well, with me 3 grandchildren. So that's basically it.
I was born at St Mary's Hospital in Manchester, and I grew up in Manchester, but I spent quite a lot of my time growing up in New Mills as well.
So I'm born and raised in Derbyshire. In fact, Edwina Curry, High Peak's very own Edwina Curry, was my MP when I was a kid.
And why are you living in the High Peak now?
Well, initially I moved here because my work moved up from London to Manchester. I stayed in Manchester for about 6 months, but I didn't really like living in Manchester, wanted to live in the country. And the opportunity came up to move to the Hope Valley, so that's what I did, and it was a very good decision.
Well, I came back because my mother wasn't well. I came back from Spain, and because my family is here. And as much as I love Spain, love the people, love the weather, it's nothing without family.
Because I love living in the High Peak. Growing up in Manchester, loving going walking whenever it was sunny. The Peak District was immediately where I would come to go for walks. So I've always grown up wanting to live here. And before I got elected, I lived in Glossop, commuting on the train into Manchester, where I worked.
It's home. It's where my family is. I mean, after being born and raised in Derbyshire, like many people, I've moved all over the place for work. So I've lived in Staley Vegas, Staley Bridge, sorry for those that don't know things, Sheffield, Newcastle, all over the place. But, Derbyshire has always been my home, and it's just, for me, it's the best place to live in the country.
What were your first and latest jobs?
My first job was working in a shop when I was at school, and my last job was managing a project which brought together universities in the UK and in various countries around the world for research, mainly scientific research and civil research, so working with people in all different countries.
Well, my first job was when I was 15, when my parents moved us back to Dublin. I was given a choice to go to school. When I was here, I was training, my ambition was to be a fashion designer. And I was going to go to Ashton College and get all my qualifications, but when my parents decided to move back to Dublin, I was given a choice of going to school there or go and work in a job. And a distant uncle was the manager of a sewing factory. And if I'd gone to school, I would have had to learn Gaelic. I'd never ever, it's something you learn from when you're a very young child, and I'd never learned Gaelic, so I decided to go to work. So my first job was as a sewing machinist. My last one was a foster carer, and I gave that up in 2012 and enjoyed it, some parts of it.
My first official job, so one where I actually got paid for through the payroll of the taxman, would be as a fishmonger. I worked on the fish counter at Asda in Manchester. And my latest job was working as the Member of Parliament for High Peak, the best job in the world.
Growing up in a sort of what I think of as an ordinary working family. I've been working since I was 11 as a paper boy, and then I think my first job after that was stacking shelves. But I've worked at McDonald's as car park attendant, greenkeepers. I've basically done so many things over the years. My current job is I'm an employment lawyer, so I advise people on and businesses on workers' rights and discrimination, and that's the current day job.
So what experience and skills would you bring to this job?
Well, first of all, as I said, my job, well, several of my jobs actually, involved working with people across cultures, all different people, and having to listen to what they say, work on their priorities within a sort of structure, really. I've been a counsellor on High Peak Borough Council for 5 years, and I also volunteer for Citizens Advice. So I'm very experienced in sort of casework, again, listening to people, thinking about how I can help them, looking at what's available for them, and also fighting their corner. And also on the council and elsewhere, I've had to work with other people. I mean, the Green Party is quite a small party, so it has to work with people who it might disagree with in many ways, but work with them when it agrees with them, and sort of make friends in that way. And I'm pretty experienced. I've done different jobs, different things in the High Peak. I'm quite good at sort of understanding issues quite quickly, different issues from, I don't know, traffic to nature conservation to terrible benefits system, which it seems to me MPs absolutely have to do, to be quite quick on the uptake in that kind of way, as well as understanding the rules, actually. I mean, if you read about people in Parliament, or books by people in Parliament, the rules are absolutely torturous. So I've done a lot of that in my time, working on grant-giving projects.
Well, I believe that I've got a lot of life skills. I have done several jobs. I trained as a chef. I was trained as a classical singer. So I have the ability to speak to people, and I listen to people. I didn't finish school. I never got any qualifications. But I don't think that should ever hold you back from anything. I have the experience of living in different countries, so I have the experience of living with different cultures. And I'm not a career politician, and I think that's a plus.
Well, I can bone and fillet a mean fish. I used to be a chartered accountant, so I've worked with businesses of all shapes and sizes, small family businesses, some of the biggest, fastest growing tech companies in the world, from industries such as defence, healthcare, infrastructure, transport. So I have all that experience, but my core experience is as my time as the Member of Parliament over the last 5 years. And I've shown over that time that I know how to get things done for the High Peak, be it securing £11 million to regenerate Buxton Town Centre, getting High Peak's breast cancer screening unit reinstated, stopping the University of Derby's plans for an asylum centre in the High Peak, saving 77 acres of green belts on Chinley Churn, or getting £7 million to restore Glossop Town Hall and the Market Hall just behind us. So many different things. I've shown I know how to get things done.
I think you can't beat life experience, and that's what I will bring. I grew up in as I've said, a ordinary working family where, you know, money was very tight. My dad worked on the stores on British Rail. My mum was a nurse. We constantly, because of privatisation of the railways, redundancy was a topic of conversation at the kitchen table. Those experiences, really defined me. I've then gone on to work for charities, helping families, vulnerable families, get warmer homes through better insulation and more efficient energy systems. Having had the cost of living crisis just now, those sorts of experiences, that real life experience, will make a big difference. And then, you know, all my family work in the NHS, so my wife's a nurse, and my wife's a doctor, my niece is a nurse, my whole family work in the NHS, and so I hear all the time about the crisis that the NHS is facing at the moment. And again, that sort of day-to-day experience, I think, will make a big difference. And then as an employment lawyer, you know, we want to make work pay. We want to deliver more secure jobs. And so my experience, my expertise in terms of employment rights, workers' rights, and discrimination will, I think, be really helpful as a representative.
What standards do you expect from your elected politicians?
Well, there are the Nolan standards, which I'm not going to recite in fact, but honesty, lack of corruption, integrity, some sort of principle so you don't flip-flop the whole time, listening to people, not the kind of ding-dong of party politics, which seems such a waste of time, and not to get the things that people need actually done.
I believe that all politicians should push the agenda of the people that they represent, the people that elected them. Unfortunately, I think there are too many career politicians. They no longer see it as a civil service. They see it as a job and a stepping stone to getting higher up and getting higher wages. And that doesn't benefit the people they represent. They seem to court the people in order to get the position, and then once they've got the position, they forget that it's those people they represent, it's their agenda that they're supposed to push, and they tend to toe the party line even when it would have gone against their previous moral standing. And I believe that it's my job to push the agenda of the people I represent and not my agenda.
I think that people have a right to expect high standards of their elected representatives. A big part of the reason I decided to stand is that, frankly, I think politicians were failing people, and I wanted to put a stop to that. And so I think there are several things which we have a right to expect of those people who represent us. The first thing is that they work hard and that they're accessible. And I think I've shown that, working hard round the clock, taking up over 60,000 individual cases on behalf of local people, responding to over 112,000 emails. I hold weekly health and advice surgeries across the constituency, open to everyone, no appointment needed, regular meetings in supermarkets, in local pubs. I've got an office on the High Street in Wadebridge, so always open and accessible, not hiding away in London or in some ivory tower. And the second thing I think we have a right to expect of our elected representatives is integrity, that they do the right thing, that they put the country, the constituency that they represent ahead of party politics. And I believe that's something I've demonstrated over the last 5 years.
To be honest, this is why I'm standing. This is the first time I've ever stood for Parliament. I'll be 47 in July. I never thought I would stand. It was something that never really interested me. But Partygate, the whole Dominic Cummings testing his eyesight, driving to Barnard Castle, something switched in me at that point where I thought they just don't understand us, they just don't respect us. And I decided that it was time that I, having been interested in politics, that it was time that ordinary people took a stand and put their names forward, and that's what I'm doing. And I'm going to work very hard for people if they put their faith in me.
What are your 3 favourite things about the High Peak?
I think one thing is community. When I lived in London, I barely knew my neighbours at all. Didn't ever chat to them really. People are mostly friendly. There's a very strong sense of community, of sort of belonging, and people are supportive of each other. So I think that came out most in COVID, but I think it also happens, if there's someone who's lonely, quite often, not always, but quite often neighbours will drop in and so on, make sure they're okay. So that sense of community and kind of friendliness. I like the fact that it's all different. So obviously the Hope Valley where I live is very different from the market towns, the small towns, but the villages with the Hope Valley are different from each other. The towns are different, and not just in terms of their buildings and so on, but also how people are, what they like to do, what their community organisations do. And that's another thing actually, that's referring to the first question, which is very good about hiking. I mean, the amount of community activism is incredible. So, yeah. And the third one is the countryside. I mean, one of the things I most like to do to relax is walking the countryside and looking at the flowers, the birds, thinking about the sort of natural history aspects, talking about that to people. And that's, this is a very good place for that, even if you live in the towns actually. I mean, Buxton, for example, has amazing woodland around it. Again, managed by a community group. So I like the variety within High Peak. And the nature.
I love the fact it's surrounded by fields. I love open space. Even though I was born in London, raised in Manchester for part of my life, I love the open spaces. And I love the fact that it's little villages all over. Before I started doing this canvassing, I didn't realise how many groups there are. I mean, there's community groups for tidying up areas, there's community groups for looking after the woodlands, there's theatrical groups, there's groups for married people, for women, and that builds a community. I mean, this is one place that you can walk down the street and say hello to somebody, they don't look at you as if you've got two heads. And I think that, and it's self-awareness, I think, is what I love about it, and the fact that my family's here, of course, as well.
That's a very easy question. First of all, the beautiful countryside. We all know just how wonderful the Peak District is. It's a special place. I think we've all got a responsibility to conserve it for future generations. My way of relaxing is to get out into the hills, walking, and it doesn't matter what the weather is, just get away and escape, and that's what I absolutely love. The second thing is just the amazing food, the restaurants, the pubs, the cafes, the local businesses, all the amazing events. I'm sat here with a coffee from Poco just around the corner. We're in the middle of Norfolk Square in Glossop where we're getting ready for the Heritage Weekend. Those amazing businesses and events are just such a wonderful thing and make living here such a joy. And thirdly, and most importantly, it's the people. When I'm down in London working in Parliament, people in London, they're so unfriendly, they don't talk to you, no one chats on the tube, it's all very atomised and isolated. But in the High Peak, everyone's friendly, it's a real community, people look after one another, and it's just such a wonderful, lovely place to live.
We can't get past the fact that we live in probably the most beautiful place in the UK. The countryside is amazing. It's the home to the mass trespass. It's where we got access to our amazing countryside. It's the home of the original national park. So I'm very fortunate where I live with my family in Hope Valley, that I'm surrounded by incredible walks, and I love being able to take the dogs out and get some headspace and some quiet time to just enjoy the countryside. Communities would be the second thing that I think is the best part about living here. In my village in Hope Valley, I mean we're so lucky. Since I've said I was standing, we've had so much help offered in terms of picking kids up and play dates and everything else. People have really rallied round, but I see that across High Peak. I've been working so closely with community groups trying to save Gamesley Community Centre, and when Tory-led Derbyshire County Council tried to close the community centre, to see the response there and the whole community coming together save it. We're seeing that in Whitfield now, where exactly the same thing is happening, and those strong communities is how we can make a real difference here that perhaps other areas of the country just don't have. And the third one is, I mean, in my younger days, I was very fond of going to the pub, and we've got some of the best pubs in the country here. My pub use has rather changed over recent years, and but my favourite thing to do now is to go for a Sunday roast with the kids and my wife, and often we'll take our two rather crazy puppies with us as well. We're quite spoiled because in my village we've got an amazing cafe, Newfold Farm, that does just the most incredible Sunday roasts, and we've got the Cheshire cheese round the corner as well. But I'm always up for tips on where I can go and get an amazing Sunday roast.
What are the top 3 problems in the High Peak right now?
Well, I mean, there are problems of sort of underfunding of local authorities and so on, which goes for everywhere. In High Peak, affordable housing, transport, and the economy.
As I've said, I've only been a candidate since April, but I have done some canvassing and I've been listening to the people. And if you take Gamesley, for instance, I never realised, I mean, I'd passed through Gamesley going to Charlesworth and things like that, and on the outskirts it looks fine, no problem, until you go inside and you realise how neglected it is. There's fences all over the place that on people's gardens that haven't been repaired, gates that haven't been repaired, things that have fallen apart, and often on people that have disabilities or they're aged people and don't have the money or the ability to fix themselves, and these have just been neglected. You've got a community centre that was built by the residents of Gamesley and now is in the hands of the council, and the council sold it off. So they're going to have nowhere for kids to go to sports events or anything like that. They're also selling off all the green areas around the estate. Now, that estate came to be in the 60s when they moved people from the inner cities into that area, and they promised them then that they would have a train station. They're still waiting. There are 2 places where they can put a train station. The tracks go straight past the estate, and they still don't have a train station. And yet they're building more houses, and they're not social housing. This is private companies building houses to make profit off the land that the kids play on. And this really shouldn't be allowed. I mean, if they're going to build anything, it should be social housing, because the people can't afford to buy them. And they're increasing the population of the estate, and yet there's no infrastructure there. It's wrong. It's totally wrong. It's immoral. You've also got the fact that we've got a lot of people in the High Peak that having mental health issues, and they're waiting years. We need our own mental health centre for the High Peak, and nobody is even talking about it. It's shocking that people have to wait years. We've also, we need more access to, we need a local hospital, and I've got that from people who live in Buxton.
We were talking about what you think are the top 3 problems in the High Peak at the moment.
Well, like I said about Gamesley, I mean, people have a right to have pride in where they live. And from talking to the residents of Gamesley, a lot of them are so fed up. They feel neglected. And as I said, we need a mental health centre for the whole of High Peak. We need to get people that I've spoken to several people in New Mills, and they've got relations that are just not getting the attention. You can't get to CAMS. You've got years of waiting lists. And the thing is, with mental health, people need help now, not in 2 years, 3 years' time. Terrible things can happen in that time. And I've had people say to me they need access to local hospital for this area as well. I mean, we've got the population. You know, we should have it. But these things have to be fought for. It's unfortunate, but we have to fight for them. because the councils have proved over decades they're not going to give these things that are needed. And we need the people to stand up, band together, just like they do in all these groups, and fight for what they want. Make the politicians, make the councillors take notice of what they need, instead of favouring ridiculous ideas that, you know, oh, they'll put in new gardens, or they'll do up some building when people actually need the money spent on them. After all, it is public money.
It's a competitive field, so coming up with the top three isn't the easiest, but I would say that the top three, first of all, would be transport, the state of the roads, the congestion, the lack of public transport that is reliable and frequent and you can depend on. That is a huge problem in the High Peak and much of the north of England. So I'm desperate to fix that issue, getting the potholes repaired, investing in our roads and our railways and our buses so that we can actually get the High Peak moving again. And the second one would be access to healthcare. Obviously we've had the pandemic, which has put a huge strain on the NHS, and that has meant that it's much more difficult for people to see a doctor, to get a dentist, and that is something which we desperately need to change. And thirdly, I would say it comes down to the issue of the economy and jobs, because everything that we want to do in terms of things like investing in transport, in schools, in healthcare, all of those things, if you don't have a growing economy, then you can't deliver those things. And if you have inflation running through the roof, then no one can afford anything. So that is absolutely essential, so that you've got the jobs and you've got the economy and the stability, so that people can start a business, so that they've got a secure home, so that they can depend on the future and plan ahead and not be stuck in a situation where they're facing rising bills all the time. And so that desperately needs to be addressed.
This is an interesting one because I'm often asked on the doorstep, what are your priorities? And there are so many things wrong across the country and that are affecting people here in High Peak. The biggest issue I think that we're facing is often transport. It's the thing that people bring up most on the doorstep with me, whether it's the potholes in our roads, the congestion and the pollution. I will work very closely with Johnny Reynolds in terms of the Mottram bypass and making sure that gets built. But also, we need a solution to the congestion and pollution here in High Peak. And Johnny Reynolds and I will be going to see National Highways if I'm elected to try and get that solution. But we need the other side of the coin as well. We've lost over half of the buses in High Peak. I've heard tragic stories of people, an individual turning a job down in Glossop as a manager in Buxton because whilst they could get there on the bus, they couldn't get home. And so they turned down. This is people's lives that are being affected and held back. Lots of people tell me that they can't get to hospital appointments because the buses don't run and so forth. We also need to sort out our trains. The state of the trains has been horrendous over recent years, and the Labour Party has said enough is enough, and we will renationalise the railways. So we think we can make a big difference to transport. The other main issue is dentistry, NHS dentistry. High Peak is a NHS dental desert. I hear stories of people travelling miles to try and get to see dentists. Not as far as I'm aware, I don't think any dental practice in High Peak at the moment is taking on adult NHS patients, and something desperately needs to be done about that. And then the pollution in our rivers. We're in the top 50 worst affected areas by having raw sewage pumped into our rivers, and something has got to be done to clean up our rivers, because our environment is our biggest asset, and is so precious to us, and we simply can't carry on in the way we are at the moment.
How would you solve those problems?
Yeah, transport, and this is both sort of local but also very, very much national. We need to work hard to encourage people to use cars less, because basically the problem with transport part revolve around cars. But people have to use their cars because there aren't really alternatives very often. It's very difficult, for example, to travel between one town and another, or between one town into the countryside without a car. So the first thing we need is much better public transport. And there's sort of little workings at the edges around that. So there's a bus service improvement plan, which I have to say is not doing a great deal for High Peak, but it does exist. But it's not strategic. It's got sort of little mini projects in it, but there's no real thinking about how we can get what people want. And what people want has been developed in several places, Hope Valley, Glossop, Buxton, Hayfield, by local groups. And that is regular, reliable, very important, frequent public transport, which connects people to where they want to go. So, for example, people in Glossop would like a regular, frequent bus to Sheffield. People in the Hope Valley would like connections with Chapel and Buxton, where they often do their shopping. So there needs to be a proper integrated plan, based partly on the work that's already been done by the local groups, but also as part of a national strategy, really, to develop proper public transport according to local need. And the other thing we need, which again is being worked on by community groups and has sort of little bits of piecemeal funding, like the Active Travel Plan for Glossop, from, well, in this case from Derbyshire, but that's not enough. It's got to be made much easier for people to walk and cycle within their towns, and if they're very fit, between their towns. We're mainly really talking about sort of everybody here. So ordinary people who are able to can go to the shops or whatever, walking, because it's safe and pleasant and there are fewer cars, and the same with people who can cycle. Moving on to the economy, obviously that is partly what in fact is very much a national problem, and the first thing the Green Party would do is to raise the level of universal credit and also to raise the living wage, and that would help the local economy, because citizens' advice, almost everybody I see who's distressed financially becomes depressed and anxious about how on earth they're going to live, and that completely distracts them from using their skills to actually get into the workplace. So at national level we really need to support people with, I suppose, the cost of living to raise their incomes, so that they do feel able to go out and train and work and so on, and to work quite often in the tourism industry. I mean, that's one industry which quite rightly High Peak is trying to boost, and that needs to be managed in different ways. So we need to attract people into the market towns such as Glossop. So I'm sitting opposite the old town hall, and I know that the indoor market has been beautifully renovated, but we need to get people into Glossop to spend money in that market and to make it viable, and also to boost the local economy, produce an income for the storeholders, and also in the market hall that could benefit people who actually can't make a huge income through the raise in universal credit and so on, to fill the spaces for creative activities and so on, free spaces. But boosting tourism also means having decent public transport, because the Hope Valley is absolutely crowded with cars, which rather ruins the well, for nature, the appearance of the place, which is why people come there, their enjoyment of the countryside, and also has negative impacts on local communities. So all these things are actually connected.
As I've said, I've only been a candidate since April, and my focus is trying to get the word out, trying to see people, talk to people, convince them that we need change. And if I am elected in, then it's my job to get the right people together, to find out the solutions for these, who are the people to see, who are the people that can make these changes. And as an MP, then I have the authority to push ahead with it. But without being an MP, I have no authority at all.
Okay, so first of all, transport. This is a big one. How do we solve that issue? First of all, it's the basics, fixing the roads. That's why I've worked so hard to secure an extra £176 million to go towards roads in Derbyshire, and that needs to be spent properly, not just patching constantly. It needs to be a full plan over many years. This is going to be our road resurfacing plan, so you fix first time every time and not waste money on shoddy patching. It's also about investing in the infrastructure, not just maintenance. So that's upgrading our railway lines. That's why I fought so hard to get the £145 million upgrade of the Hope Valley line. We're trying to get that line electrified now as well. We also want upgrades on the Buxton line and on the Glossop line to get Gamesley Station built to deliver for one of the most deprived communities in the country, to help them get access to jobs and employment in the town centre. Also, to improve buses. I managed to get £47 million extra for improving bus services locally, and we've had some success. We've managed to reinstate the 185 bus to Buxton Hospital or up to Harper Hill. We've managed to extend the 272 bus later on the weekends so that people in the Hope Valley can go out in Sheffield and then come back late on the bus. We've extended the 341 bus so that people who work in Glossop can get back after work on the bus to Gamesley or to Charlesworth, which they couldn't do before. And also been able to save other buses like the 358, get the 199 reinstated going to Manchester Airport. There's lots more to do on the bus front. And finally, it's about investing in our roads. We've got to get a traffic solution for Buxton and the A6, where there's real problems ever since the A555 opened. I've worked together with other MPs in the region to set up an A6 task force, so the councils in High Peak, in Derbyshire, in Stockport, in Cheshire can be working together to come up with a way to improve traffic flow along that corridor. We also need to sort out the horrendous traffic mess that is Glossop and Hatfield, and that's why I have pushed so hard to get the Mottram bypass built. I live on the main road in the centre of Glossop. I'm the first MP to live in Glossop since 1929. This is something that's been very personal to me. I'm very proud to say that construction on the Mottram bypass is going to begin this August. Next, how do we deal with the issue of healthcare? Again, it's a huge challenge to tackle the challenges in the NHS to recover from COVID. That's involving record real-term increase funding to recruit doctors and nurses so we can increase GP appointments to catch up on that backlog. But it's also why I've pushed so hard to reinstate the breast cancer screening unit, to improve that access to healthcare, to get new urgent care centres built at Tameside Hospital, at Stepping Hill Hospital, to open 2 new specialist mental health units at Tameside and at Stepping Hill, one for men, one for women. That's why I'm working so hard to get a major new health centre for Buxton, working with the local NHS. I'm also working with dentists to open a new NHS dental practice in the High Peak, because dental access is not good enough. That's why there's a new dental recovery plan to try and train more dentists, but also encourage more to left to the private sector because of the awful old NHS contract that was written up in 2008, to bring them back into the NHS providing free dental health for people. So there's a huge amount that needs to be done when it comes to healthcare. But as I've already said, if you're going to be able to pay for all those things, you need to have a strong economy that's growing, and that's why for the third challenge facing the High Peak in the country is about economic stability, economic growth, tackling the cost of living. That's why everything that the government has been doing over the last couple of years has been focused on getting inflation under control. It was up at 11% after COVID and after the war in Ukraine. We're able to get that down to nearly 2%, which is making a very big difference in terms of pressures of bills. But at the same time, it's about jobs. I'm really passionate about helping people into work and helping people get the skills that they need in apprenticeships. That's why one of my promises at the last election, and one I've delivered on, was to set up the first ever High Peak Jobs and Apprenticeships Fair programme, which we've done every year since I was elected. Over 1,000 local people more are now in work than they were when I started the programme. That's made a real positive difference to lots of people. I want to continue with that programme. There's also a risk here. Labour's proposal when it comes to jobs is to introduce a French-style trade union laws, which would effectively make it so much harder for employers to take on new workers, and that would put at risk huge numbers of jobs. Remember, every single Labour government that's ever come into office has left its employees higher than when they entered office. So it isn't just my job that's on the line at this election. There are tens of thousands of other jobs on the line. So we need to make certain that we get the economy right. One, so that people have secure jobs and secure homes, but two, so that we can improve the country, so that we can improve our health service, so we can improve our schools, so that we can build the bypass, so that we can invest in our railways and our buses. None of those things are possible unless you have a solid foundation of economic growth.
Well, as I said, in terms of transport, you know, we would. I'll make sure that we build the Mottram bypass, but we get a solution to the congestion and pollution in Tintwistle and Charlesworth and Glossop. Better public transport, so we're going to take back control of the buses so that they're running the interests of local people rather than the bus companies. And we're going to take the railways back into national ownership because privatisation has clearly failed. On the NHS, in the 2010 Conservative manifesto, well, it was in the Labour Party manifesto as well in 2010. They said that they would reform the national dental contract. 14 years later, they've not done it. They've not made any progress. It needs to be done. We've lost loads of dentists as a result. That's why none of us can get NHS dental appointments. Wes Streeting, Labour's shadow health secretary, has said on the Monday after the election, if we form a government, he will go and meet the British Dental Association. The British Dental Association have said that they will clear their diaries and that contract can start happening. What I can do is, in terms of the interim measures, is the Labour Party has said that we're going to create hundreds of thousands of emergency appointments and run a recruitment campaign in the worst affected areas. And I'll be making the case that High Peak is a dental desert and we should be an absolute priority for more dentists, so that we can get people the services that they deserve without having to leave the area or go private. And then the pollution in our rivers, I will be absolutely making sure that this is front and centre. I'll be raising it in Parliament. Labour has a plan that is clear that the water companies have been taking money but not protecting our precious rivers and waters. We'll stop water company bonuses until they sort out the sewage in our rivers. We'll prosecute them. We'll create criminal offences if they continue to pollute our rivers, and we'll require automatic monitoring. So no more self-monitoring. There'll be automatic monitoring to make sure that they're complying. And I'll be absolutely making sure that happens, because this is an absolute priority. And, you know, as I say, one of the most beautiful parts of the country, we should have the cleanest, safest rivers to swim in and to have in our communities.
Finally, why should we trust you?
Well, I'm honest. I say what I mean. I'm definitely not corrupt. I mean, I would challenge anyone to find an instance of me being corrupt. I'm pretty consistent, as people will vouch for. I talk about things in the same kind of way about environment, obviously. I'm a Green Party candidate. Also, I'm consistent about caring for Well, for people who are less advantaged than me, I mean, I know that I'm comparatively advantaged, but that doesn't mean I don't care about other people, about the people that I talk to as a counsellor and also systems advice. So I'm good at working with other people, as I've already said, which is pretty essential. And I don't kind of get into rows for the sake of it. I really think the whole part of politics is terrible. I'm pretty straightforward. I mean, I say what I think. What you see is what you get.
I don't ask anybody to trust me. I mean, we've got decades of politicians that have proved you cannot trust them. The only thing I can say is that I promise that if I am elected, I will do my utmost to preserve what we have in the High Peak and what we feel is important to us and what we hold dear. And I'll fight for the things that we need.
I think that actions speak louder than words, and I believe that over the last 5 years I've demonstrated that I know how to get things done. All the things that we've been able to achieve by working together with local people. Things like getting the High Peak Jobs and Apprenticeships Fair programme set up, getting the Mottram bypass built, upgrading the Hope Valley line, securing investment in Buxton Town Centre, in Glossop Town Centre, securing levelling up funding, and securing huge amounts of additional money for Buxton Opera House and Buxton Festival, to get levelling up funding for Glossop Town Centre, to reinstate the breast cancer screening unit. All those things I've demonstrated through the hard work that I've put in, that I know how to get things done, and that if you re-elect me, I will continue to do it. Now, the election is a choice. All the polls show that Labour and Keir Starmer are going to win a huge majority. So your vote won't change the national result, but it will decide who represents you as your local MP in the High Peak. That is the choice you need to think long and hard about. All I can ask to local people is come into this election with an open mind, think really carefully, listen to all the arguments, judge me on my record locally, what we've been able to achieve over the last 5 years working together, and how we can continue to keep working together to make High Peak an even better place to live. So judge me on that local record, think long and hard, breathe deep, and on the 4th of July, vote local, vote Lager.
Why should we trust you?
I think because I'm not a career politician, because this isn't the be-all and end-all for me. I'm doing this because I think I can make a difference. I think we desperately need change in this country, but I'll be honest and straightforward. I won't pretend that I'm not a Labour MP. If the Labour government do something and I vote for it, I will explain why I voted for it, and I'm ready to be held account. I think the difference in mindset coming to this, and I accept that people do it in all different ways, but stepping forward at this point, I'm stepping forward because I don't like the direction of politics at the moment. I think we need more ordinary people with more life experience there, and I'm willing to be accountable, and I hope that people will hold me to account, and I'll be happy to try and work hard to earn their trust.
Okay, so just to get the sound, what's your favourite dinosaur and why?
Stegosaurus, because I like the word and because it's a sort of typical dinosaur, monstrous body, tiny head, lots of armour plating and sort of mad armour plated spines all along its back.
It has to be the Triceratops. It's I think when I was a kid I thought it was cute, but looking back I think it's more to do with it was more recognisable than the others, so it looked like a rhino, and I liked rhinos, and it was a little bit cross between an elephant as well, so I think that's why a lot of people tended as a child to think of a Triceratops as their favourite, whereas Tyrannosaurus Rex was a bit scary.
For the sound check, What's your favourite dinosaur and why?
My favourite dinosaur is a Stegosaurus because they're awesome.
Well, definitely as a kid, it was a Diplodocus because we had a sort of animal encyclopedia, and I love looking at just the sheer size of it. Now, I'd say it was probably my kid's toy dinosaur that has a habit of popping out from behind doors and scaring me to death.